as if you didn't watch this, if you didn't watch the sentencing, remember this is the guilty verdict for the murder, the hiding a corpse, and stalking of 2 people. Now, this was the conviction, very nutshelling it, based on no body. He's still legally listed as missing. No body, no defendant DNA anywhere near the crime scene. No blood in the vehicle where the body was allegedly stored to be disposed of. One fragment of alleged DNA that was so tiny that it couldn't be tested to see if it was blood. The only thing the DNA experts could say was it was a single source male donor and the deceased could not be ruled out. Etc. etc. I said no body, no direct evidence anywhere, and the jury came back with a guilty verdict. This is the sentencing for that verdict.
So what I'm asking the court to do is on count 3, sentence him to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. But then I'm also asking for a symbolic sentence, as obviously that would take him to the end of his life. But I do believe that Miss Beacham deserves her own sentence.
No.
Because what she was put through, the following, the gaslighting, the terror, everything that she had to suffer because of her stalking, I think deserves its own distinct sentence. So I'm asking
the gaslighting. We're all being gaslighted.
That life sentence.
You're gaslighting all
honoring
of us.
The fact that she also was a victim of this.
Jesus.
And she also paid dearly in a number of different ways that she indicated to the court. I would also ask that you make the hiding a corpse count also consecutive, because that is a separate and distinct crime. That is a cruelty that almost goes beyond even what the murder was.
She talks about how
because the family is left to grieve, but to never really know. So for all of those reasons, I do believe life in prison without the possibility of parole is the only sentence to render here. And I would ask for those consecutive prison sentences in recognition for what those counts are separate and distinct from the homicide of Mr. Gutierrez Jr. For sentencing purposes, I believe there is 1,092 days worth of credit, not counting today. I would also ask for a restitution hearing to be set, as I know that some documentation is still pending regarding some of those requests. And I believe that that would be appropriate so that parties can have all of the documentation before making a formal request. Thank you.
That is the stupidest fucking thing I've ever heard.
Thank you, Judge. Thank you, Judge. We have people on behalf of the defense that would like to.
Now this is where we get interesting. We'll play this a bit, then we'll talk. Nicole makes some amazing arguments.
Speak as well. I'd like them to go first before. Right now, I want to confirm, but I know for sure that it will be Mr. Solomon Anderson. That's the brother of Mr. Anderson. I'm not sure if there's anyone else who'd like to speak. I obviously have been sitting here at council table, have not been able to confer with them, but if my paralegal may so do so shortly, just ask briefly and ask that the court give leave for us to be able to do that.
Boomer moment.
Judge
didn't turn the mic on. He's talking.
Are so closely impacted by the case that
again, and what you missed is the judge saying, well, the victim's family was impacted, and we the impact statements for those family members that are impacted by the statement, and then he's going to say, well, I just don't think that Zach's family was impacted by this.
Special attention should be paid to their thoughts. For example, a good connection would be a firefighter or police officer whose life was lost, and some of that individual's comrades would be permitted. But as a general statement, I don't permit statements by other than the attorney and the defendant.
What?
What?
You asshole!
Are you kidding me?
Mr. Anderson's family members have been affected as well by this case.
Yeah.
Will be affected by the sentencing.
Absolutely.
If the court
Solomon
would
has
permit,
worked
just to allow
incredibly
Mr.
hard
Solomon Anderson
on his
to
statement.
provide a brief statement, I think it's important for this court to hear from people who have known Mr. Anderson for the majority of his life about his character.
Yeah, character
So I
evidence
ask
of the
court to
defendant
allow the
is
defendant
appropriate to be
present
presented
one.
at a sentencing.
Judge, the defense would maintain the position that Mr. Anderson's family members have been affected as well by this case, will be affected by the sentencing. If the court would permit, just to allow Mr. Solomon Anderson to provide a brief statement, I think it's important for this court to hear from people who have known Mr. Anderson for the majority of his life about his character, because naturally that's not evidence that can come in during a trial. And I think it's important for the court to consider the character from the perspective of the defendant, and the defense believes that there's no one better to do that than Mr. Anderson's own family members. So I'd ask the court to allow the defendant to present one individual to speak on his behalf.
I don't see a letter from him, so he could have offered one of these letters and had it come in more timely had there been one.
I want to yell a bunch of expletives at him in this moment. The issue with that is that he already went through the trouble of disparaging the letters from Go. So he starts out. Sorry, I have like just like real contempt for this moment and just like really in the core of my being. So he went through the trouble, and he's going to do it again shortly. But he goes through the trouble of talking about how the letters, the character letters, are not worth reading for a judge to consider for sentencing. He just said that at the start of this hearing. And then he goes on to say, well, Mr. Anderson didn't submit a letter. Well, I didn't submit a letter because the court itself gave us direction on what we were going to be able to present in his defense, in my brother's defense. And people were allowed to write letters, and there was a rubric supplied to us through my brother's attorney for us to follow, which included what he's about to disparage. But
yeah, we'll talk about that when we get to the disparaging part there.
Right. And, but also that I had spoken with Nicole about this, that we had 2 or 3 people that were going to be able to speak on Zach's behalf, and that those speeches she just wanted to go over with me. I ended up being the only person to write a speech and was going to give it. And I asked her specifically if I also needed to submit it in writing as a letter. And she said, no, that won't be necessary because you're going to be speaking on his behalf. So the fact that he then says that in the courtroom, I was boiling. I was livid in the gallery.
Well, this is when I wrote off Judge Schrader forever and ever and ever as a fair and unbiased judge. I gave him multiple benefits of the doubt because he would do things for the prosecution, do things for the defense. I thought, okay, he's relatively fair and balanced. But now I just said this is bullshit. Absolutely, because that's when I was texting with you, let that scumbag Daryl Brooks's family and other people testify for him during the impact statement, but another court, another judge doesn't allow it, and he says he doesn't. He never allows it. Well, why do people seem to think that he does? Could it be because he said I will consider it at the beginning of this trial, and then you get to this point when it's like, all right, let's let him speak, and he's like, well, never mind, I never do this. Well, why the fuck did you make it sound like you did at the beginning? Why did you make it sound like you were going to do this? I don't think you can have 2 separate judges having 2 separate handlings of victim impact statement. There needs to be a rule that either says yes or no for the families or people that associated with the convicted parties. You can't have someone like Daryl Brooks getting to have family members talk about what a good guy he is, but not someone like Zach. This makes no sense to me, and it just infuriated the shit out of me. And I'm done with Judge Schrader. I've had a few of his clips here that I would play at various. I'm done. I'm never going to play another fucking Judge Schrader clip ever again. I have lost absolutely all respect for him because of this last minute and the next 2 minutes. I'm just done. And I know you said you were just shaking with rage at this point. I would like to think that I would have handled myself as well as you did in court, but I don't know.
I mean, if it means anything, I thought about standing up and giving him a piece of my mind before walking out of the courtroom, but I felt like that would not represent my brother well anyway.
Yeah.
Reviewed his thoughts, but I'm not seeing. There's one from someone who identifies.
There's one from Zenith Anderson, who is Mr. Anderson's sister. Judge, respectfully, the defense was not notified that we would not be able to have people speak.
I don't know why you would think that. I can't remember when I ever did.
And that's fine. That's fine.
It's 40 years, and so I'm going to say no.
But this thing that Judge Schrader does with her letter pissed me off. the way, and it's gonna it pissed me off even more when I was talking to Solomon before this started. And we'll let you all into this after he basically is ridiculously condescending about Sadie, sorry, about Zenith's letter. The way he disparaged the letter and was condescending to Zenith's letter was just freaking ridiculous for more reasons than I knew.
Well, then I will speak at length of Mr. Anderson's character as I know it, as
What?
What?
You
Not
asshole.
good
Oh,
off
you
Solomon.
Are you
know
kidding
how
me?
it's
Mr.
Solomon?
Anderson's family members have been affected as well by this case.
Yeah.
Will be affected by the sentencing.
Absolutely.
If the court
Solomon
would
has
permit,
worked
just to allow
incredibly
Mr.
hard
Solomon Anderson
on his
to
statement.
provide a brief statement, I think it's important for this court to hear from people who have known Mr. Anderson for the majority of his life about his character. Over the last 3 years, I've gotten to know a very different side of Mr. Anderson than which was presented during the trial in this case. It's very easy to point out the negative characteristics of someone and to address the negative characteristics of an individual when that's all that's been presented. As the court's well aware, there are numerous rules of evidence that prevent certain types of things from coming in at a trial. Things that show the good side of Mr. Anderson, the good memories that people have, and the positive things in his life.
You know,
Listen to this bullshit.
I don't want to unnecessarily elongate this, but I have made exceptions. When someone offers me something about, well, 2 years ago, he was walking down the street and there was a building that was on fire, and at risk of his own life, he went in and rescued a whole family. That's something I would certainly want to hear about. And that would be different. But here, the first letter he gave me.
Listen to this shit. And like I said, I thought it was a shitty thing for him to do at the time. But after talking to Saul, now I'm just livid. Just listen to this shit.
She's telling me her passions in life are music and animals. I have too many dogs. I have a wonderful cat, a gorgeous buckskin quarter horse. The things I love most in this world are my son, my family, friends, and chocolate cake. That isn't going to help me.
Why, Solomon? Tell people here what you told me before we started. Why did Zenith put that in her statement?
So the lawyers had sent us the rubric provided, and the rubric provided an introduction that briefly described who you are, your relationship to the defendant, and something about you. So the judge got to know who you are and why you're making this statement. So that was just the opening to her letter. It goes on to outline how Zach was there for her, how he helped her buy her car, how there's all kinds of information that was provided about the character of my brother and how he invested in his family and things of the sort. It was so disgusting for him to dismiss the letter based on the rubric provided by the court, to my knowledge, that our lawyers sent us to follow. That was the appropriate format for the court to receive, so the judge had the letter in hand and could weigh what was said by the people that were making statements on his behalf. So the fact that he then goes on to disparage all of the letters, and mostly my sister's letter, based on the fact that she wrote a couple sentence introduction outlining who she is and effectively her interest and where she is in relation to Zach, is infuriating.
See, that is some shit right there. I mean, that one, give a bit of your background so the reader will know something about you, discuss your employment, marital status, community involvement, etc., is the exact verbiage. Thanks, Jen, for providing that. Yeah, so tell us something about yourself. Oh, there's just useless stuff about you, and that pissed me off so much when you told me that, because it was already a dick move. Thanks, Jen. Again, I mean, I thought it was a dick move just to disparage the letter anyway from the sister of someone who is potentially going to prison for the rest of his life, disparaging her emotional comments. But then when I find out that apparently it was based on exactly what the people submitting the letters were supposed to write in the letters, he's disparaging the letter for including something that they were supposed to include in the letter. That is some serious bullshit to me. I mean, I'm done with him. Done.
of the type I mentioned that is especially commendable in the defendant's character, I certainly would welcome that. But just a general character endorsement by his brother would not generally have significance in the decision I have to make.
At this point, I was in the gallery trying to hand to the deputy behind moving a little bit. I was trying to hand him my speech so he could walk over, like, give it to the judge. I was like, give it to the judge right now so he can weigh my words. If he wants to see what I was going to say, here it is. And the deputy just said, no, it's too late.
I was simply just presenting the defense's position on sentencing.
She's making her argument.
Well, that I understand, but the way it began was
senile piece of garbage.
Following up on the discussion we had before. So I certainly don't mean to cut you off.
I think it's
yeah, you did, because you did.
Because I do felt cut off, and I do feel like the court does not want to hear about Mr. Anderson's character as we see it and as I'm allowed to present it. But I would like to continue on talking about Mr. Anderson. This is the sentencing for Mr. Anderson, as the Supreme Court in this state has made it very clear that pursuant to Gallion and McCleary, that a sentence, regardless of what the crime is, has to be individualized.
That's
has
my
to
girl.
be for the man who is sitting to the left of me.
So here's the other part of this is that Gravely had his hand so far up Schroeder's ass, working the puppet, that he's explaining the execution of the law to the judge. Why? Why is it necessary for the DA to explain to the judge what she's doing in the courtroom? Shouldn't the judge have a better handle of that?
You'd think. But yeah, again, I was surprised, and again, one point for Gravely for this, and minus several million points for everything else he's done during this trial. But he did stand up for the defense and say she's arguing her point, and he was standing up for her. So whatever credit is due for that, bless you, Gravely, but get fucked.
For what Mr. Solomon Anderson would say, I was simply just presenting the defense's position on sentencing.
She's making her argument.
Well, that I understand, but the way it began was following up on the discussion we had before. So I certainly don't mean to cut you off.
I think it's important, and just a premise, because I do felt cut off, and I do feel like the court does not want to hear about Mr. Anderson's character as we see it and as I'm allowed to present it. But I would like to continue on talking about Mr. Anderson. This is the sentencing for Mr. Anderson, as the Supreme Court in this state has made it very clear that pursuant to Gallion and McCleary, that a sentence, regardless of what the crime is, has to be individualized, has to be for the man who is sitting to the left of me. And if I can't speak to who that man is, I don't think this court can sentence him pursuant to that. If I can continue, I would really...
What was that?
He cut her off again. Yeah.
I would really appreciate that, Judge.
There we go. Yeah.
If any of my remarks suggested I did not want to hear what you have to say, I apologize for that. I don't think they did.
I think they did.
Yeah, absolutely they did.
That's exactly what they did.
Statements of others, but go ahead. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Judge. As I was saying, it's quite easy to focus on the negative aspect of someone when that's all that's been introduced. Mr. Anderson is a father, is a brother, is a son, and his entire life he has maintained those roles and has executed them. He has many good memories, and some of those memories were shared by others on the other side and in the letters that were provided to this court that I know the court had to review. Memories such as not cutting his hair until his daughter could cut his hair, teaching his daughter how to skateboard, being a supportive figure in not only his family's lives, but his friends as well. That was reflected in there. The state went at length to talk about how Mr. Anderson's prior record is indicative of his character and his denial and way to push off responsibility. And I don't think that's accurate. The latest offense that seemed to have gone unnoticed as far as accepting responsibility is the South Dakota case. There was never any thwart to responsibility. There was never any denial in that case. Mr. Anderson took a plea, and that was that. As far as the state's assertions as it relates to the 1994 disorderly conduct use of dangerous weapon, the defense would maintain that the court should not consider that. One, there's really not any information on what that was. The PSI writer even said, I can't gather any information on what happened here because no record exists. So I don't think it's appropriate for the state to assert, oh, he had a dangerous weapon and denied it when there's no proof of what actually occurred in the 1994 case. Not to mention, there was no finding.
And again, 1994.
In fact, when we look at Mr. Anderson's record, there's really nothing there comparable to why Mr. Anderson sits in front of you today. There's no history, no convictions of violence that's not shown because that wasn't and isn't Mr. Anderson's character, despite the verdict in this case. The defense sits before you in an extremely uncomfortable position. We have a situation here, Judge, where the defendant maintains his innocence, yet we have a verdict. We have facts. The defendant at no point wants to discredit how individuals, family members of Mr. Gutierrez feels. I don't think there's any dispute that no one's heard from him, no one's seen him. And we would sit here in front of you and say that for those who, relating to Mr. Gutierrez, sit there and feel that they have some sort of guilt. Julian, his son, had noted that he felt guilty because he should have stayed, that none of them should feel that way. We have the verdict, but we also have laws that are in place. Specifically, Wisconsin Statute 973.
Completely closed. He's sitting there.
Which allows this court to determine.
You could tell that he could not give a shit what she's saying. He could care less.
Where Mr.
The way he's looking at her and the way he's presented himself in body language.
Actually, the state in this case is asking that the court deny that opportunity. Several individuals who spoke on behalf of Mr. Gutierrez and those who were directly part of Mr. Gutierrez's life asked for the same. But I think we also need to look at the fact that even though the legislature enacted the mandatory minimum, in this case, that being life, they also enacted this statute. And they did that because they recognize that there are things that can happen where an individual should be able to return back to society. And we have that because as a country, as a collective people, our inherent nature is not to be barbaric, is not to put people away for the rest of their lives. We want people to be able to return and contribute in a positive way to society. That's why we have the correctional system. So the defense would be asking that the court consider setting a release eligibility date in this case. And it can obviously be as far out as the court would want. The defense would be asking that it be set for after a 25-year period. Thank you.
Solomon, if you want, tell us what you were going to say that you weren't allowed to say.
Our family wants to extend our deepest condolences and our empathy to Rosario Gutierrez's children, family, and loved ones. They didn't ask for this situation. They're victims of a heinous crime. However, Zach is innocent of this crime, and now he's a statistic. According to the National Registry of Exoneration, 2 to 10% of convictions are wrongful. An estimated 230,000 inmates in the prison system are innocent, and exonerated innocent people have served over 25,000 years in our correctional system as of June of 2021. Sorry. My brother is a good man, albeit not a perfect man, but good nonetheless. He's always prioritized his family before himself. He got me my first job outside of working on a farm, at the local, our tree farm, actually. And he drove me to work and home from work for every shift, regardless of whether or not it was sleeting, snowing, or he was puking his brains out. He taught me to drive, and he took me to the gym when I was young. He taught me to work on myself and my self-confidence, even work through my own shyness and anxiety. He was always there for me to support me, advise me, or be my devil's advocate, just to make sure that I was thinking of things thoroughly. Zach has always been drawn to people that never had a fair chance at success in life or were downtrodden by the system. He rented his income properties out to people who were disenfranchised at below market values so he could help them recenter their life and get ahead when they were behind. That included Sadie. When her property was foreclosed on, he bought it out of sheriff's sale to preserve it for her. He made sure that the inheritance that she received from her mother's death was preserved for her to have in the future. His focus has always been on the well-being of their children. Even though his parenting style is unconventional and it promotes independent problem solving and thought and an independent approach to situations and life itself. He was investing his time and money into fixing up his home to prepare it for shared physical custody. He struggled daily with the absence of his children. Struggles of his present test. I'm sorry. The adoration of my niece in his eyes was obvious when he was finally allowed to see her in person in this courtroom. Yet he was hurt and confused when she referred to him as the defendant after she had been influenced by the district attorney. My niece has struggled over the last 3 years to cope with the situation that is disseminated from this tragedy. She is understandably wounded, confused, and emotionally distraught. She even commented on a video of Zach on April 28th of this year, stating, "I miss his voice," as she had also commented here in the courtroom. She is not the young woman liberated from a tyrant that the prosecution would have you believe. She is still a girl that needs and wants her father. My nephews deserve to grow up with his love, his wisdom, and his support. Zach is largely the glue that holds her family together. He is the sibling that pushes for tradition, calls randomly to check in with us individually, and is willing to go out of his way to attend our celebration for birthdays and whatnot, and even our board game nights. He's the one of us that can get Josh to take a break from planting trees or shearing them to come spend the night with the rest of his family. His absence has been and will continue to be felt at every family gathering, at every D&D night. His outside-the-box thinking, his wit, humor, and contagious laughter are missed by all of us, his family, and his friends. Convicting Zach wrongly has stolen justice from Rosalia Gutierrez's family and his friends, has stolen a loving brother, father, son, and friend from our family and our extended community. He's stolen a hardworking contributor from society. The people that perpetrated this crime are still at large. And as this is your final criminal case, I implore you to do the right thing, to overturn Zach's conviction and reopen this investigation to finally bring closure to Rosalio's mother and his children. Finding the people that did this will find the body of Mr. Gutierrez if he has been murdered. and ultimately what his family deserves. Thank you.
Wow. Thanks for doing that. I think it's important to get everybody's side out, not just one side. And I wish that other people to hear that, and I hope the right people hear that at some point.
Yeah, me too.
Appreciate you sharing that with us. Well, let's hear from Zach himself.
All right, Mr. Anderson, is there anything you wish to say before sentence is pronounced?
How much time do I got?
Well,
oh, and see, Judge Schrader was a fucking idiot for thinking that he meant how much time am I going to get sentenced to?
Yeah,
I mean that was a stupid fucking thing for him. We'll talk about that. I mean, what an idiot! Seriously.
It's a testament to his personality, the fact that his brain wasn't even there. He was thinking about the sentencing and not even the situation at hand.
Yeah, he's like, well, we'll tell you how much time you get later, but do you want to say anything? Well, and it's clear he was asking how much time do I have to talk. And I mean that Schrader's an idiot for saying that.
Anderson, is there anything you wish to say before sentence is pronounced?
How much time do I got?
Well, I'm going to talk about that a little bit. Oh, you mean how much? Oh, I misunderstood. I've had people give us
we're not
different version.
Not that version.
How much time do you have to talk?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll give you a reasonable period. I mean, this is one of the major events of your life, so you're certainly welcome to speak. I'm not going to say it's unlimited, but you're welcome to tell me what you think. Speak from your heart.
I don't want to go into all the details of the case. We had a lot of dispute about what was said, what was portrayed. I think the facts, with a little more scrutiny, tell a much different story than what the jury decided. And I don't think that things played out fairly. I think that there's some things that are not just from our side, questions outstanding for both sides. And I don't think the court accomplished what it set out to do in any means if both sides are left with so many questions. And I don't think, without going into the case, I don't think we really got to the heart of the matter. What I can tell you is I didn't kill anybody. What I can tell you is I didn't stalk anybody. And what I can tell you is I didn't dispose of any corpse. It's really weird to be sentenced for or convicted for it and soon to be sentenced for it, but I didn't, Judge. It kind of feels like there's no turning around on that now. I don't really know how to make a better statement of my opposition, but I disagree. I'm innocent. I don't know what you're going to decide. I don't know what you're all going to weigh. I don't even know how to represent my own character without having my family be able to testify on my behalf. But they do have some things that are relevant. I mean, even during the trial, there was a gentleman who tried to come up and talk to me. I think there was a comment about how now everything has happened during the trial. When he made that attempt, nobody really knew who he was. And I do know who he is. He's a man who I saved from assault in jail. He's actually related to one of the jailers. And my heart went out to him because I know he appeared inebriated, and I know he struggles. And I know he was coming up here to talk to me because we got along so good. But those tiny little moments throughout somebody's life, nobody accounts for those. But what they do a really good job of is making up all of these things that they want you to believe when they can label you as a monster. I still didn't. It's still weird. I want to be remorseful, and I am for the things that I did wrong. You're welcome to sentence me for everything that I did wrong, just like the judge in South Dakota. The only thing that I disputed in that instance was whether or not I was coming back to Wisconsin with that, which the prosecution has now repeatedly made false statements about on their own assumptions, hoping that everybody in this courtroom, everybody that's watching this would buy, oh yeah, he was bringing something back to Wisconsin. Not true. Was I caught with marijuana in my car? Yeah. Yeah, I was. Should I have? No. I've been the rules there, broke them, broke the rules. And when they said, hey, this is a problem, I said, well, I did knowingly, and I'll be held accountable for it. That's it. And if I killed somebody, whatever that situation was, I can tell you in my own heart it wouldn't be intentional. If I didn't at all, the guy I never met, I don't really know what this is, but I didn't do it. I'm innocent, Judge. Not guilty. I'm innocent. So.
Thank you.
A few minutes later.
I was very, very moved by the testimony or the remarks today by the lives that were touched by your vicious criminal act. And I wondered, to what extent did this man even think about these things? Was he so wrapped up in himself that it didn't even matter to him the effect it would have on the people who
this
loved
is
him?
like the look like he knew it was coming, the biased judge.
So if I got into the issue of deserve, that would certainly be at the forefront.
And that was him being like, are you fucking kidding me? But all right, whatever. It is what it is.
I will say that you have been cooperative throughout these proceedings.